Hi, I'm Stefan, the BMW DIY guy. Do you want to dramatically improve the suspension on your BMW M2, M3, or M4? I'll show you how. All right, y'all, let's talk about this project and why you're going to want to do this yourself on your new G80. So that would be the G87 M2, the M3, or the M4. The suspension and this instructions will work on all three different cars. Now, the existing suspension, especially the electronically controlled dampers, they're pretty good. They're pretty good, but there's always room for improvement. Now, Kies Motorsports and Moton Suspension have partnered to make a very special kit for the entire G80 line. And you see in this case, even branded Kies Motorsports. Now, I'm gonna walk you through how to install the suspension kit. These are coilovers, these are excellent. They have camber adjustment plates on top, everything that you would want for that next level suspension in your car. Maybe you drive a little bit more aggressively, maybe you get a little bit of track time in. And the nice thing about having the adjustable at the top is that you can set between the two depending on what you're doing. Maybe your M car, you're at the track a lot during the summer. So you actually can adjust your suspension and change your camber and set it up a little bit more aggressively for the track, which is not what you'd want to have on the road for day-to-day driving. So the install itself is not all that hard. I'm going to walk you through this entire process. Now, I'm only going to show one side because the other side is going to be exactly the same. So let me walk you through it. Now, the very first thing you're going to want to do is get your car in the air. As you can tell, mine already is. So I'm always going to say this, make sure you get it up in the air safely. This is a project you absolutely can do with a single jack and jack stand, do one wheel at a time and work your way around. You can do it with Quickjacks like I have or whatever your setup is, but please make sure to do it safely. Do not bet your life on a 50-cent part. Don't use just a jack. If you are doing that, make sure to use a jack stand as well and be safe. You don't want your car to come down because a 50-cent part failed, okay? So, very first thing you want to do is get your car up in the air safely, get your wheels off, and we're going to get started. All right, so let's get started. So there's a couple of things that I'm going to point out in the differences between the all-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive. And this being a rear-wheel drive M2, I'm not going to be able to actually show you, but we can talk about it. So if you have an all-wheel drive, you have a gigantic 17-millimeter bolt right here in the center of your hub. That it's a collar bolt that you're going to need to take out. So you're going to need a 17-millimeter Allen socket and a breaker bar because it's in really, really strong. You're also going to at least briefly need a second person to step on the brakes really, really hard to keep your hub from spinning to be able to get that bolt out and get that free. I don't have that, so I can't show that to you. Now, we're here on the driver's side in a US car, or the left side. All of the parts we're going to work with are marked left and right as we go through them, but we're here on the driver's side. Now, the one difference here on the driver's side that you won't have on the passenger side is you have a little control arm right here, this level sensor right here, that has two 10-millimeter nuts at the top and bottom. So go ahead and pull those 10-millimeter nuts to pull that little arm off, and you'll have that both on the front wheel and the back wheel here on the driver's side. You don't, when we take this down and this sags, you don't want to break that. That would be a hassle. So go ahead and get your collar bolt out if you have it. Go ahead and get that arm off and set it aside, and then go ahead and take a T30 and take out your speed sensor right here. All right, guys, so quick caution. I just broke mine. So I don't often show, hey, don't break these sort of things or be careful, but in this case, since I just broke it so easily, I want to make sure to point this out. What I'm going to suggest is taking off the bottom very, very carefully. Do not touch the top. I was going to take off both, and I got my 10-millimeter socket here on the nut here on the top, and I was just settling in the socket. I wasn't even turning it all that hard, and it just broke clean free of this armature. So this is that arm that goes up and down from the sensor, and this arm just broke clean off right here on the end. So I am going to have to figure out what it takes to get that replaced. Now it looks like this entire piece all plugs in to a socket right here and this upper piece right here. And I suspect if it's that fragile, it's going to be easy to find the part number to replace. So if you're following this, or when you're following this, undo the bottom one first. Undo the bottom one, then just slide the arm away, and you should be fine, unlike me. I will have the part number for that sensor top, or that sensor plug, which looks like there's a torque screw in the top. So if you do what I just did, you can replace it too. All right, so get your speed sensor out, go ahead and get your control arm off more successfully than me, and then we're going to go into next steps. All right, so next up, your speed sensor is on a clip right here in the back. And hopefully you can see my finger right there. You can see it clips in right there, so you want to press it out of that clip. Now that clip is about to become very problematic here on the car. So when you put in the new strut and you have the spring perch that sits right here, this clip is literally in the way. And this has to do with the difference in dimensional sizes between the G80, G82s, and the G87s. We all share the same components, but the G87 is a little bit smaller and a little bit more compact. And so this clip, right, or this arm right here is actually in the way of the spring perch when we get the new strut in. So there's a couple of different ways you can go about this. You can either bend this all the way down, which essentially makes it useless because you're not going to clip the speed sensor wire back into it, or just simply cut it off right here at the bend. You can see right there where my finger is, right there at the 90-degree bend where that comes out. I find that's the easiest thing to do, is just cut it off. Bending it down out of the way just means it's bent down and still doesn't do you any good, where if you cut this off, you have all the room in the world for that back portion of the spring perch of the new piece we're going to put in. So go ahead and take a tool, cut that off. Be very careful you don't hit anything else along the way. I like using a Dremel tool. Just come in with a metal cutting blade on it and just bang, cut it right off. And you'll never miss it. All right, so go ahead and get that cut off, and then we're gonna take our end links off next. Okay, so since I have one drop link out, let me show you what this looks like. So you're gonna take a 16mm wrench and put it over the top. And then you're gonna take a T30 for what's called a center hold. You're going to take this and put this into the center and hold it while you back that nut off. Because if you just try to do it with a 16mm socket, the post will spin. You have to hold the center of the post. Okay, so, and then there's one right here, which is very hard to see. You can get your eyes on it, but I can't get my camera on it because this plate's in the way. It's right here at the top, and the other one is here from your sway bar here at the bottom, which is easier to get at from underneath. It's right here. It's very easy to see right there. So center hold the post on this with a T30 Torx bit. Take a 16mm socket. The one other thing that you can use is that you can use an open-faced wrench or an open-faced socket, which is like this. So where the center of your socket is actually hollow, and you can reach in through the center of it and get it out really, really easily, because you can see it's open all the way through. These are really handy. You don't have to use one of these, but if you have one, it's handy. Then you can take like a screwdriver with a T30 socket or T30 bit at the end and insert it all the way through, and it sticks out. So it makes it really easy to do it either way with this open socket or a 16mm wrench. Okay, so go ahead and get those off and get your drop link out of the car. All right, so once you have the end link out, let's go up here to the top. You're gonna wanna remove this plastic cover. Mine looks a little bit different depending on whether you have the M2, M3, or M4. Mine kind of overhangs your strut braces a little bit. That's not a big deal. Go ahead and take out the plastic rivets here, 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 and here, and then this is essentially loose. You can start to wiggle it up and off. You're also gonna wanna take the plug and work this plug up and off the top of your shock tower as well. Now we're gonna deal with this a little bit more later, but you can just get this to pull up and away from the top of your shock tower like that. All right, so go ahead and leave it up and out of the way. Now you've got E14s. These are reverse Torx here, 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 and here. What you're gonna do is break these loose and give them just an extra 1 or 2 turns. Do not take them out, but go ahead and just break them loose and break them free, because that's going to give us a little bit of wiggle room from the strut as we break it free of the wheel hub here in a second. So go ahead and loosen these up, and then we're going to start working back on the wheel hub. All right, so let's talk about next steps before we do it. Now, if you're using Quickjacks like me, I've moved down to the lowest position to make sure that my jack will reach. If you have a tall jack, that's fine. But you will, if you are doing this with jack and jack stands, you will need a second jack to support your knuckle here in a second. With my Quickjacks, like I said, I moved them down to the lower position and I've set my jack in place. Now my jack is now sitting on the back of the knuckle of this right here. It is not sitting on the heat shield or on the rotor itself, because the rotor itself will spin. This is up, and I'm using a rubber block to lightly support the back of the knuckle, because as this comes free, what we don't want to have happen as we loosen up the rest of these bolts, what we don't want to have happen is have your knuckle fall really hard. That can snap cables, sensors, mess up your alignment components and everything else. So we're going to do this very slowly and very carefully as we move this down into place to separate it away from the strut. Now the strut itself, you've got a 16 millimeter bolt and nut right here that we're going to reuse. Keep in mind alignment. The bolt goes from the front to the back. So the nut is on the back side. It's going to be that way on both, that the bolt goes through towards the back. And any of the bolts that we take out on this project, make sure that you put them back in the same orientation. So just note that as you do it. So front to back on these bolts, same thing on the other side. All right, so we're going to take this bolt off. When we take this bolt off, on the back of the collar right here is a little notch. This is where you use a spindle spreader. Now the spindle spreader will go into it and then just quarter turn to spread that collar open just enough to give us a little bit of room. Okay, so support the knuckle with your jack. Go ahead and take this bolt out with a 16 millimeter nut on the back side, put in the spindle spreader and quarter turn to get it to separate. Okay, so you can see the bolt is out easily enough. One other difference between the all-wheel drives and rear-wheel drives is I only have a single bolt with the rear-wheel drives. The all-wheel drives will have two, top and bottom. So you want to take the top out, then the bottom out. You'll also need two spindle spreaders for both collars here and here. I just need one. You're going to take the spindle spreader. You'll feel that there's a notch right here in the back. We're also going to pull a bracket off here in just a second that covers that notch. But we'll get that bracket off. The one other thing you're going to want to have is a big, strong set of zip ties. Now you can use extra strength plastic ones. These are rated up to 120 pounds. You can use metal zip ties, which are rated up to 150 pounds. You loop it over this metal strut right here. You can see there's some cables there and the like. Don't pinch those. Loop it up and over that metal loop right there, and then loop it through the collar right here to help support this and to help keep it from falling. When we start to let our jack down and slide it away from the strut, again, we do not want this to fall hard and damage any of the sensor cables or anything else. So go ahead and put that zip tie up in here and up in here. We'll tighten it down in just a second. And then this bracket on this side, now that this bolt is out, this bracket will come off. So you just push it back and away because it actually sits in the same channel as that bolt, and the bolt holds it into place. So now with that bracket out of the way, you can reach right back here and you can feel in between both flanges of this collar, there's a little gap right there, and that's where you're going to put your spindle spreader and quarter turn it to get it open, and then take your wrench off and leave the spindle spreader in place to help hold this collar open. Okay, so get caught up on all of that, and then we're going to slowly take the hub off the strut. Okay, you can see I've got my spindle spreader in place and I've got my zip tie set and ready to go, and it's about as loose as it can be. I can always tighten it up a little bit once I get the knuckle off. Now, the other thing is when we reinstall, and I'm going to mention this several times, this cable goes in front of the strut. This is your ABS sensor. It goes in front of the strut, so make sure that when you reinstall that it's in the front as well. If need be, you can always unclip it from the bracket here to give yourself a little bit more room. So now at this point, the only thing that's holding this knuckle on is friction and the jack. So you're going to want to very slowly let your jack down a little bit and start to sag the knuckle down the strut itself. Now, mine are kind of crusty for whatever reason. They can be really slow to get off. What you can do is you can wiggle the strut, which is why we loosened those E30s at the top, and slowly get this to start to come down, and just slowly ease it down the strut. You'll see it start to gap. Be patient. Don't rush this. Don't jam on this super hard. I also found a little bit of vibration helps. If you have to, I've taken a rubber mallet and just very lightly tapped on this collar to give it a little bit of vibration as it slowly settles away. So slowly lower your jack, make sure that this is well supported, and get it down off the end of your strut. Okay, so work that down. I'll show you what that looks like when it's done. So I'm a big fan of being really patient as you do this. Like I said, I just let the jack down. I'd let it down about an inch, maybe an inch and a half, 2 inches at most. you know, the jack would start to gap away a little bit because of friction here, and you know, where it's not coming down, it's not sagging down, but I'd only give it a little bit of space. Then you can gently tap on the collar. You can also grab the rotor and very lightly vibrate kind of front and rear, and it'll shimmy down the strut. And you can see where it used to sit from the dirt line. And just slowly shimmy it down until you can see it's pretty much free at this point. Now, it's still supported by the jack. I've cinched up my zip tie just a little bit in case of emergency and this thing slips. I don't want it to fall away really sharply and do damage to anything. Once this collar is down all the way and your strut is free, go ahead and take out the E30s at the top, all 4 E30s, set this down and pull the strut out. Okay, so let's talk about the strut a little bit now that we're ready to reinstall. I will talk to the differences between the rear-wheel drive and the all-wheel drive. There are some small differences, and I'll point them out. So first of all, when you look at the strut, this is for the driver's side, or left. You'll see the L. This is the orientation it's going to go into into the car. The L is going to be on the inside, so make sure that you put it in the correct orientation. Now, in addition, when you look at this, there's a number of things. Now, first of all, if you have the all-wheel drive, you're going to have a plastic cup that goes around here on the end and a C-clip here at the top. If that C-clip has come out at all, if one of the arms has come out at all, make sure to squeeze it back into place so the cup covers it pretty much entirely when it goes in. I don't have that with the rear-wheel drive, but I wanted to make sure to point it out. Now, in addition, you can start to kind of get an initial set of your height of your different pieces here. So this is your height adjustment. This is your spring perch right here. What I want is just to make it easier on myself is to have them be consistent across the front. Your suspension will settle in, it will adjust. You can make your car a little bit taller, a little bit shorter, depending on your setup. But what I want right now is reasonable height and consistent across the front. So this top collar, which is what you turn to tighten down, it is just tight enough that the springs are tight. They're not moving around at all. It's almost at its maximum height, almost. Then I've taken the bottom collar and I've turned it up to tighten it up into place. I'll show you what those tools look like when we get a little bit closer, but all I've got now is just consistent. Same thing with the spring perch. I've got basically 3 inches from the shelf here to the top distance. It doesn't really matter as long as it fits your car. This is just to be consistent when I get it installed. All right, so now at this point, this is where you're going to want to start to fit this in the car into the correct orientation, which, like I said, is with the left inward. You can take it and fit it up into place and loose fit those E30 bolts. Now, make sure to check the video description. I have the part number for those E30s. They do recommend changing them. And unlike some bolts where you can reuse, I do recommend changing those. So take 4 of your new bolts, loose fit your strut up into place, hold it up, just finger tight those in so your strut is tight, and then we're gonna fit the knuckle back onto the strut. Okay, so once you have the strut fit in, and again, these E30s are just loose here in the top just to hold the strut in place, and you've used your jack to just very slowly raise the hub back up until it hits the top of the collar here, right here, or fits completely in place. You'll be able to tell because it'll want to start compressing the spring and moving the car. It's solid once you hit it. Also, make sure again that your ABS cable is on the front of the strut. And I pulled it free of the clip right here to give me just a little bit of extra wiggle room in the cable, just to make sure that it was a little bit easier to get in. Again, double check your orientation. Make sure your spring perch is sit pointed towards the back. We're going to do fine adjustments on that in a second. I talked about the height of your spring and the height of your spring perch. But go ahead and get this in nice and solidly and up with your jack. Now, you can go ahead and undo your zip tie at this point. I'm going to cut this off. You can take out back here. So you've got your spindle spreader, which is just came out on its own. So you go ahead and take that out. And then we're going to set and we're going to start securing this all back in. All right, so take out your spindle spreader and your zip ties if you haven't already. This is where we're going to fit this bracket into place, and you can kind of see where it slots through, and this top bolt goes through this hole. So when you set this into place, it's going to fits only kind of in one way and fits back into this collar. And we'll just work this bracket back into place so we can put in the top bolt. So this is going to take a little bit of manipulation. There we go. Okay, so the bracket is back on. Remember that this bolt goes from the front to the back that way. And then that's going to torque down to 56 Newton meters. If you have the top and bottom, do the bottom first and then the top. In my case, I have just the top. So 56 Newton meters to torque that bolt down. And then we're going to work on the E30s at the top next. So once the collar bolt is torqued down, let's get up to the top here really quickly. So a couple of things here about the top. First of all, your rebound adjustment. These are 15-way adjustable. So what I normally will do is I'll turn them completely to one side and click back to the middle. So click back 7 times, which would put us right in the middle. You can make adjustments over time depending on the comfort you want of your ride. Now, these E30 bolts, these are going to be torqued down to 128 Newton meters plus 120-degree turn. So if we're here, so we torque around, we get to, it torques out right here, and what I do is I just measure 90 degrees plus more, right? So measure out 120-degree turn once you hit your torque value of 28 Newton meters. These are stretch bolts. This is why you recommend replacing them. Now, in addition, what you're going to want to do is you're going to have to take the car in for an alignment, but what we want to do is set it for essentially what is 0 camber right at the moment. So if you grab the strut, this is why these are adjustable. You want to pull outward to pull them out as far as they'll go before this torques us down. This essentially sets your wheel at 0 negative camber. So it sets you up to go in and go for an alignment. Okay, so torque these down to 28 Newton meters plus 120-degree turn. All right, so with all those torqued down, you can go ahead and put this plastic cover back on, but we're gonna have to remove this plug. You'll see it comes around and goes into this plug right here. So you depress the little tab and unplug it, and then go ahead and just leave the cable end right here and you should be good to go. So that'll be all set, because reminder, we're going to be coating out the EDC. So we're removing this EDC plug-in sensor for the top, and then go ahead and put the plastics back in place and put those plastic rivets back in place. Okay, so with all that torqued down, you can go ahead and just remove your jack. It's good to go. And then we're going to want to install the speed sensor bracket in this orientation. What we want to do is put it around the strut in the lowest position possible, like this. It'll sit like this. And then we're going to use the factory T30 right here. So we'll take the sensor, we'll mount it back up to this. It only goes in one orientation. Then go ahead and put the T30 back in. This is a 8mm nut and a 4mm Allen on this side, and just snug them down. It doesn't have to be overly tight, just enough that it's not going to move. Don't crush it. All right, so go ahead and get your speed sensor back on, and then we're going to put our drop links in next. Okay, so let's talk the new drop link here really quickly. I took the covers off. You notice you've got 2 washers and a new 17mm nut. When we put this on, we're actually going to stack both washers on the opposite side from the nut, just to keep that in mind. Give us a little bit more space as we work with this. Now what I normally will do, and this is adjustable, so if I spin this counterclockwise, it gets shorter. Spin it clockwise, it gets longer. So what I normally will do is I'll take the locking nuts, I'll back them out as far as they'll go, and then I shorten this as far as it'll go. And then I will slowly dial it into the correct length to get it into the right length to fit in to the spring perch here and the end of your sway bar there. Once that's in place, we can use the lock nuts to tighten it all down. But as you fit this in, these should be at nice 90-degree angles when you get in. Don't have it, because this is adjustable, you don't have to worry about it being at a strange angle or anything like that. Just dial it in perfectly so both sides fit in. Put the washers on the non-nut side, and then loosely put the nut back on. All right, so you can see the bracket is securely in place. Now notice that the sensor is upside down technically from what it was last time, but it's still facing inward, so that should be fine. Now one thing we want to do before we torque down our drop link or end link is tighten this collar. So this is a 6mm Allen, and you don't need to crush these. These just need to be snug. Make sure that perch is pointed straight back. So make sure it's just nice and straight back before you tighten this down. So once you have these snug and the perch won't move anymore, you then can tighten down and torque the nuts on your drop links. That's 56 Newton meters on both. Make sure you're going to hold with that 17mm Allen and a T30 through the center to hold the center post, and go ahead and torque it down. All right, so with that torque down into place, you just want to tighten these down.
you hold this with a 16 millimeter and you tighten this nut with a 17 millimeter. And it just needs to be snug, and do it at both ends to snug down that nut to make sure that this doesn't turn. Again, you can still adjust this if you want. I like to have the ends of the drop links to be at that nice 90-degree angle straight through. So that'll work just fine. All right, so once you get that done, we'll talk about putting your that big hub bolt back in if you have it, and we're almost done with the front. All right, so now that that's done, at this point you go ahead and reattach your level sensor back here. Obviously mine's still broken. There's just a little T20 Torx bolt right here to replace the sensor, so I'll get that replaced and get that arm back on. And then go ahead and put your collar bolt back in. Now, if you have the all-wheel drive, so simulating it, you would turn your hub and you'll hear it click. So click, 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 and then bring it back just a little bit. Go ahead and put that 17 millimeter collar bolt back in. You're gonna have to have somebody stepping on the brake again to hold it in place, because when you torque it down, it's 210 Newton meters plus 90. So it's a pretty significant amount of torque to get that into place. So get that set if you've got it. I don't, and get your level sensor reattached. Okay, so one of the very last things we want to do, again, is talk about ride height with these collars here. You're almost never going to get it right on the first time because coilovers always settle. So I take a just very conservative setup to begin with, and I measured both. I've set both front struts to the same height to start, and I've snugged it down. What you're going to do is take the tools and just counter rotate, so you can see that it's got the little tab here that hooks in on one side. So you take the second tool and hook it in on this side to snug that lower collar up into place as you turn it and pull it, because they counter turn into each other. The top collar up and down is what compresses the spring. The lower collar spinning up into it is what holds the upper collar into place. I wouldn't go too bananas on it to start, because you're very likely going to have to make adjustments over time, but get it to a conservative setting for now. I'm never going to slam my car. I don't want to be damaging my front lip or deal with steep driveways, that sort of thing. But for now, this is a good conservative setting that will hold the spring in place while I take it to the shop for alignment as well. All right, so the front is done. The other thing I did do is I zip tie our speed sensor cable back here to the brake line with enough give on it. And the zip tie isn't tight, so it's got a little bit of give to it if I need to. But again, because we took that one bracket off that this normally would connect to. But everything else is torqued down, set, and ready to go. Up here on top, go ahead and put your top plastics back in place with those little expanding rivets, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you can take your cover as well and snap that back into place. So just leverage in on this side and turn the lock and lock it all down. At that point, the front's all done. Let's go ahead and bounce to the back. All right, so here we are at the back. So the very first thing we're gonna do is you look all the way through, just to see all the way back here. Here's your level sensor right here. We're gonna undo the bottom. Take off that bottom 10 millimeter nut, and then very carefully back that arm off the control arm so we don't break that. That would be a huge drag. Now, next up, you're gonna see right here, it's a little hard to see right here, but this is the plug-in for your sensor, for your EDC sensor back here in the back. It's right up here in the center. You're gonna pull down a little locking tab, and I'll show you what the plug looks like once I get it out. But you're gonna pull down on the little locking tab, press on the tab, and pull this loose, and that will get this unplugged. All right, so do those two things first, and then we're gonna undo the bolts at the top of your shock tower. So here's the plug. So you can see it's up in this orientation like this. So basically you can use a pick tool to gently pull down this white tab, pull it down a little bit, and then press on the tab and then pull down on the plug, and it'll come off and away. For now, you can just tuck it behind the plastics or your wheel well liner there. Good to go. Now, in a triangular position, 1 here at the front and 1, 2 here at the back. They're very hard to see. They're easy to get your hand on. Are 3 E12 bolts. So go ahead and get an extension and pull out 1, 2, 3. Go ahead and pull out all 3 of those E12 bolts. All right, so next up, so go ahead and pull both cables out of their little clip holders right here. Give yourself a little bit more extra room. You've got another T30 right here for your speed sensor. Go ahead and take that bolt out, pull that sensor out, and get it safely out of the way. Next up is the bolt here at the bottom of your strut tower. These are 18s on both sides, so you're going to hold it and take the nut off, but do not take the bolt out. Also, keep in mind, look at the orientation of the bolt. In both of the bolts that we're going to take off, you're going to want to put them back in the same orientation. Okay, so go ahead and get this nut off, but do not take the bolt out yet. All right, y'all, so looking for it from underneath so this makes a little bit more sense. So what you really can do is some folks will take the camber bolt out, but that can be a challenge to get back in. Plus, as you can see with all the marks here for when my car was aligned from the factory, you have to get it back in the exact same way. The alternate way is to take this very large 21 millimeter bolt here in the back out. I would argue that's the easier way and less disruptive to your alignment settings. So this is a 21. Again, look at the orientation. The bolt head is at the rear of the car. It's going forward, where this bolt goes the opposite direction. It's coming from the front towards the back. Okay, so but again, we've left this strut bolt in for now. Now, as you can tell, I've taken my jack and I've applied a little bit of upward pressure to take some tension off of this bolt. So this helps compress the spring a little bit. It makes this under a significant less tension. And then go ahead and take this out. This is a 21. Go ahead and back this bolt out next. All right, so the bolt is out, and I just wanted to give a shout out for the proper tools. So this is a very high torque bolt under a fair amount of pressure from the control arm and everything else. So getting this out by hand can be a significant effort. Now, it's very possible with a breaker bar, 21 millimeter wrench on one side, 21 millimeter socket and a breaker bar on the other side, but it is a lot of effort to get done. Especially if you have your car up on jacks and it's not on lift and you can get up underneath and get a lot of leverage. Huge shout out for my new DeWalt. This is the new XR, 20 volt XR. I set that on its highest setting. It's got 3 different settings. It's an impact wrench. I set it on the highest settings. It chattered for about 3 seconds and then just started backing this bolt right out. So I'm really impressed. Since I've picked up this tool, I highly, highly recommend it. It's really good. And it took what would be maybe 10, 15 minutes doing it by hand and took it to about 30 seconds or less with the right tools. Okay, so the bolt's out. Now what you're gonna wanna do is very slowly let your jack down. That swing arm is gonna swing down and away, and go ahead, and the spring is eventually gonna come loose. Take the spring out and set it aside. All right, so with the spring removed, you can back the bolt out here at the bottom of your strut. So again, it should just push out gently. Remember its orientation, and then you can just feed this out because it's loose on the top. So go ahead and feed your strut out. So let's talk about the new one. Now you can tell which one is right and left. This is going to be driver's side or the left side because we want the port here on the outside. Now the cool thing about this kit is these are one-way suspensions. You can actually convert them to two-way and put in external canisters if you want to do so. So you want to make sure that these are exposed. So this is on the outside, just like on the other one, which are marked left and right. But these rear ones, you want to make sure that the port is on the outside. Same thing, I've set my spring up in the same ratio as the other. This one doesn't have a double locking collar. It just has a hex nut on it. But this is about 3 inches. The other one's set to about 3 inches in compression. And this is a very, very light spring, so it's easy to compress. But this is about 3 inches of compression, okay? So go ahead and get that set up. So fit this back up into place. You're gonna set it in and guide it upwards, and then you can loosely install the original bolts back into place to hold this in place. Okay, so one more thing I want to note before we slot this up into place. One, you can set your rebound again, 15, so run to one extreme and roll back to the middle, run back 7 clicks to get you in a nice middle position. And then this has a zip tie on it to help keep these 2 ends in place, because these ends will actually come out. So be careful with these. Now, when you look at the swing arm itself back here, and it's gonna be a little bit hard to see right now, but the slot that this goes into basically has been grooved out. They've hollowed out the top edges. They've beveled back the top edges for this bar to go in. But what I have noticed is that if you're trying to force this, this can start to get a little cockeyed. It'll not sit straight. It will jam itself in when it actually can swing in really, really nicely and smoothly, and it should. So we'll cover this more once I run the swing arm back up. We're swinging that swing arm back up into place and making sure that this is in the correct alignment when we do so. Okay, but I just wanted to give you a heads up before we start. Now you can take this, fit it up into place. Again, the port on the outside, fit it up into the mount at the top, and go ahead and put those 3 original E12s back in. Don't torque them down for now. They can be a little bit loose just to hold this in place. All right, so the strut is in, and you can see it's still got a little bit of wiggle room too because the bolts aren't tight yet. And here you can see the collar of where this is going to slide into, and it's been shaved down. It's got a lip on the bottom edge, and it's flat on the top. It's been beveled to help this guide this into place because it's a pretty tight fit. So what I'll usually do is I'll push this forward, swing it forward a little bit as we swing the control arm back up, because what we want to make sure to do is that this piece goes in straight as it goes. Okay, but it's got enough wiggle room on it that we usually can slide it forward enough to get it mostly in line right here, as you can see, but it's not completely, and we'll make sure that this fits into these positions as it slides forward. Now, the back here, so as you swing this back up, you're going to find, you can already see that this is out of alignment a little bit. So what you're going to do is put the bolt in, and what I find really useful is that if you take your wrench and go on this side, so the support bar side, slide in a wrench and use it to just leverage this piece back, as you can see, as it starts to straighten it back out. So you can use this as leverage to get the bolt in, to get the bolt all the way through. And go ahead, once you get it in, go ahead and snug it down. We'll talk about torque values here in a minute. The back is in and snug. We don't torque it down yet. We actually want to do that once the car is on the ground. So you can set it on blocks, you can set it on race ramps, whatever it is, to be able to get underneath the car to torque down those last values. It's 165 Newton meters once you're able to torque that down. Now, here on the front, this is lined up very, very well. We can put the bolt back in here at the bottom. If you find it's offset a little bit, what you can do is just, again, put your jack here underneath under the knuckle and very gently raise it so the bolt goes in easily. Make sure that it goes in the proper direction, so front to back in this case. And then we can torque down your E12s here at the top at 28 Newton meters. All right, so those torque down to 28 Newton meters, and the strut bolt itself to 100 Newton meters plus 90. So make sure that that's set up properly. Now what we can do is we can put our bracket back in. So this is going to mount our sensor. We're going to mount it on this side, and then the sensor itself we will connect here and tuck the cable back behind. So go ahead and pull this 10mm plastic nut, tuck the cable back here behind, and get that nice and secure and ready to go. Reuse the factory bolt to put that into place. And again, remember, just all of this just needs to be snug. It doesn't have to be overly crazy. Now, with your bracket here, again, we've set it to a set height, and I've snugged down the Allen bolt that holds this in place. It's not, don't go crazy on it. Plus, you're gonna have to make adjustments over time. So you'll be set there as well. All right, y'all, we're almost done here in the back, so just one final check through. Remember, that back bolt is 165 Newton meters that can be torqued in properly once your car is on the ground. So you've got 100 Newton meters plus 90 here on the strut bolt. Your cable here that comes up, that clip is now gone. So what you want to do is you want to zip tie it to the end link right here. And I've got enough play in it that I can move if it needs be, but it should be good to go. You just need to keep it away from the spring so it doesn't get pinched. Your speed sensor cable gets tucked back behind, again with that 10mm nut right there, so you tuck it back behind. Your cable here from the EDC can also get tucked back behind. Make sure that everything is good to go and all tied up and tight. So at that point, you should be good to go. If you haven't done the other side already, go ahead and bounce over to the other side. If both sides are done, go ahead and put your wheels back on. All right, so back on the ground, so go ahead and torque down your lugs. It's 105 foot-pounds or 140 Newton meters. So, and do them in the typical star pattern. Just remember, don't do them in a circle. Go diagonal in a star pattern and get all your wheel lugs snugged down. All right, y'all, so a couple of things about adjusting the ride height on your car. I had to make some adjustments after I got it onto the ground because my car was way too low. So just a note, on the front, if you want to make your car taller, the collars go up. On the back, if you want to make your car taller in the back, the collars go down. So I significantly ran my collars up equally on both sides and equally in the rear to get an equal height all the way around, measuring from the fender edge down to the ground. So now my car is equal all the way around, isn't completely slammed, and I can get out of my driveway. Now,
You can always adjust these later. I will be making adjustments later as it all settles in. I want to bring the car down a little bit. I'm actually at about stock height right now, and I want a little bit lower, but I'm not hyper aggressively lower. So important to note that you will need to do some adjustments along the way. And in my case, I had to do some adjustments the moment they hit the ground. Now there is one last thing to do, and that's coating the car. So let's jump into that. All right, guys, so there's one last thing that we want to make sure to do so we don't have any errors in the car, and that's actually coating out the EDC. So when we jump in the car, you're going to want to hit your ignition button 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and that will put it in diagnostic mode where your ignition will stay on. Now, and it will say diagnostics mode on your screen, which is really, really good. So make sure you have that and your car doesn't turn off in the middle of coating, which would be a bummer, right? So you're going to want a license for Pro Tools. The link for that will be in the video description below. And also I'm going to be using the Kies Wi-Fi adapter as well, which is in the video description. So I've got my car in diagnostics mode. I put the Wi-Fi adapter on the OBD port. I then connect to it using Pro Tools. You can use any Android tablet, phone, whatever. I just use my phone. It's a great app to have, very, very handy, and we're going to need it in this case. All right, and I took notes to make sure that we go through every single step along the way. So I'm going to go through these a little bit slowly. So if you're following along step by step, we're plugged into your car, you can follow everything. Okay, so when you launch Pro Tool, you want to connect to your car. It'll take a few minutes, it'll read all of the diagnostics, and then it'll give you a full breakout list of everything that's going on in the car. You're going to want to scroll down to a section called Virtual Dynamics. Okay, when that loads, scroll down to the bottom, you're going to see an icon, usually in the lower right, that says Coding. When you select Coding, then you click Edit Coding. Now, really, really important. At this point, it's going to prompt you if you want to back up. Absolutely, yes, you want to back up. This is going to take a snapshot of what's going on in your car before any changes you make. So name it something good. Put in the date, put in that you were coding out EDC, pre-EDC, something like that, so you know later down the road, if you need to flash back, you know exactly what you're looking at. Or if you make any other changes with Pro Tools, you know which version you're looking at over time. Okay, so go ahead and name it, click Confirm. And when that comes up, you're going to see 2 choices. The top one is going to be 3000 VDP. So if you click on that, or tap on that, and then hit the little magnifying glass icon up in the upper right. You're going to search for VDC. When those search results come up, the very, very top item should be VDC Verbaut. My German's probably terrible, forgive me. So press on VDC Verbaut. The top option under VDC Verbaut is Kein VDC Function, and underneath that it'll also say Data 00. You'll see a series of other choices, but that's the choice you want to make. You're going to switch from a lower choice up to Kein VDC Function Data 00. The highlight should be there. When you select that, it's going to ask if you want to confirm it. You say yes. It'll ask if you want to finalize. You say yes. It's going to go through the whole system, and it'll go through the flashing process, and it'll come back and say process complete, flashing complete, turn the car off and on. It's that simple. So then at that point, go ahead and hit your ignition. It'll come out of diagnostics mode. Go ahead and turn the car off. Give it a good 5-10 seconds. Turn your ignition back on, and you should be good to go. No errors, and your EDC is coded out. All right, y'all, almost all done, almost. You still need to go and get your alignment. But if your EDC is coded out, your ride height's where you want it to be for now, make sure that you torqued your wheels down. Everything is good to go. Now, as far as your alignment is concerned, I have my appointment tomorrow. And there's some debate on how long you should wait for your suspension to settle in, but I lean on the side of getting it done sooner rather than later. I don't want necessarily some suspension element badly out of alignment and messing with my tires or anything else like that. So I'm going to go ahead and go get it done. Thank you to Kies Motorsports. I really appreciate them and the opportunity to install this kit in my car. I am really excited to get this in and see what this feels like, especially with it being so adjustable. I can mess with my ride height. I'm probably going to bring the nose down a little bit. But I am really grateful to have this in my car and see what the changes that this makes, because I hear it is a really, really good kit. And Moton is a fantastic brand. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please make sure to click like and subscribe. It genuinely makes a difference to my channel, and I honestly would really appreciate it. It makes more of a difference than you realize for that simple click. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on my next project.